Hello and welcome to the second in my series of masterclass videos for RingsFX. And in this video we're going to look at a few more advanced features. I think this is the one most of you will have been waiting for. And we're going to start off with the pulse sequencer, because I think that's one of the most exciting things in Rings. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the pulse sequencer isn't like a traditional sequencer where we sequence in notes. As mentioned in the previous video, Rings comes from the land of Eurorack, where everything is triggered by a pulse. And the idea behind this is that we can take any notes that are input and split them up into pulses of different velocities. So let's take a look and see how that works. Now, to get to the pulse sequencer, you first click on the Exciter tab, and when you click on that, you'll notice that there are two pages to that Exciter tab, as we discussed again in the first video. And since we're on page 1, we need to tap again on the Exciter tab to switch to the pulse sequencer. Now, as you can see, I've already loaded a preset called Staccato Swirl, and I'm going to press a couple of chords and let you hear what that sounds like. So as you could hear there, the display cursor was working its way from left to right, and every column it created a pulse of the notes I had pressed. And when the cursor hit the end of the sequence, it looped back to the beginning. Also notice that every time I pressed a new chord, the sequence was reset and it started playing from the beginning. And that is due to the fact the re-trigger button is enabled. If I disable that button and try playing another set of chords, this time the sequencer keeps playing regardless of the new chords. Now, the speed at which the sequence plays is controlled by the beat divider. So if we change that to 4 instead of 2, the sequencer plays twice as fast. And again, if we change that back to 1, we've now halved the speed of playback for this sequence. So let's examine another preset, California Shine, and let's first take a listen to what's going on here, and then we can break it down. So in this preset, there's slightly more going on here than just velocity changes. Now currently we're looking at velocity, but there are 5 other lanes of automation available to us by clicking on this edit button here. Notice the little asterisk next to brightness and position. So let's select brightness, and as you can see here, we have a bit of a randomized pattern here, and the same goes for position. So the position and brightness lanes are manipulating those equivalent knobs in real time. Now I can just tap, hold and drag anywhere on here and create my own sequences, even as the sequencer is playing. Now if you want to clear a sequence, simply just press the clear button on the toolbar. And if we long press the clear button, we get a randomized set of data. Now if I switch to the structure lane, which is currently empty, we can then randomize some data for this lane. And let's just play that back and manipulate some of the values. So as you can see, the pulse sequencer is great for creating rhythmic pulse patterns, and there's a lot of fun to be had by using this. Now hopefully you've seen my video on helium and tone packets, and if you haven't, go and have a look. But now RingsFX has tone packet support built in. Now I've got an example here with a chord track laid down in helium, and we're going to make this drive RingsFX. And to do that, all we need to do is make sure it takes its MIDI input from the control out port of helium. So now we can watch RingsFX react to the chord track from helium. Now if you take a look at the RingsFX settings menu, you'll see that there's a tone packets option which is set to chord, but we can quickly change that to bass or sub bass to change the way Rings reacts to the incoming chords. Now you can get some nice stereo bouncing using the various polyphony modes, so it's worth experimenting with those. So let's try bringing in some more tone packet apps and have a listen to those. So as you can see, many of my existing apps have tone packet support, and it makes communicating between them and communicating sets of chords very, very simple. So now is a good time to introduce the two different types of effects, global and modable. Now modable effects are a set of effects that came with the original Rings, the hardware version, but they were only available in certain synthesis modes. However, RingsFX makes them available to every single mode. Modable effects can be accessed by pressing this button up here to reveal a menu of effects. And it works in collaboration with this FX knob, which is used to manipulate various parameters of the effect. So let's take a listen to how these sound when I switch through the various modable effects modes. Now the formant filter is a great one to manipulate or automate from the pulse sequencer, and we can switch to the effects lane and generate some random data here and give that a go. So the reason these are called modable effects is because they can be mutated or modified using the effects button or the pulse sequencer. Now global effects are something that are accessed by clicking on the global effects tab, and you'll notice there are two pages here, so if we tap again on that tab, we'll switch to the graphic equalizer. Click again on the tab, we'll switch back to the main page. Now it's important to note that there's actually a button up the top here that toggles the global effects on and off, so make sure it's on if you want to hear the effects. So you'll find a lot of the patches already have reverb, and I think reverb is applied as part of an init patch. But basically these are all static and cannot be manipulated in real time. Now let's take a look at how to manipulate various knobs in real time to create some dynamics in your presets. Now the way we do that is using LFOs. In this case, fluid LFOs. Fluid because you can morph between various different LFO shapes. Now we're currently on the LFO tab, and as you can see we have two LFOs, LFO1 and LFO2. Now each LFO has a set of knobs, and if we adjust the shape knob, you'll see here that we can morph between various shapes. Double tapping a knob resets to default. The skew knob can be used to bias the shape to either left or right. Double tap again to reset. And the warp knob expands or contracts the shape. Again, tap to reset. Finally, the phase allows us to shift the whole thing left or right. So using combinations of these we can get some quite elaborate shapes. Now there are 4 additional buttons to each LFO, and the most important of these is the re-trigger button. This allows it to re-trigger the LFO every time we lift and then press a note. Now the bipolar button is used to determine what kind of output we get from the LFO. If it's on bipolar it's -1 to +1, otherwise it's 0 to 1. It's also worth mentioning the smoothing button, and that's great if you've got some wave shapes that are quite abrupt. For instance, the square wave, you might get clicking noises when you go from one state to another. The smoothing button helps with that. So now we know where the LFOs are and how to set them up. We need to know how to apply them, and we do that using the mod matrix. Now I want to point out that the speed here is set to 1 beat, which means it does 1 oscillation per beat. Now to apply the LFO then to any of the system-wide parameters, we need to be in the mod matrix. Now the mod matrix is simply a scrollable list of parameters on the left, and across the top you'll see various controllers that can be applied to those parameters. Now since we're going to apply LFO1 to a parameter, we need to look at the LFO1 column. Now if I tap, hold and drag in that column against the effects parameter, I can drag up and down and enter a value of between 0 and 100 or 0 and -100. So that's like a percentage of the LFO that's applied to the effects. So what you're hearing is that sine wave on the LFO being applied to the FX amount parameter. Now we could equally go down and add LFO values next to the FEG1 amplitude. And don't forget, from the previous video we talked about FEG1 being the ADSR envelope, volume envelope. So I'm going to set that to a -100. So that's currently cycling the LFO at 1 beat. So let's change that to half a beat and see how that sounds. And feel free to try out some various shapes and warps and see how they sound. Now while we're here, let's try with a square wave and we can demonstrate the smoothing option. Now you'll notice the clicking as it goes from one state to the other. But if we enable the smoothing, it sounds a lot better. Now we'll definitely benefit from enabling the trigger so that each time we lift and then press a new note, the LFO starts from the beginning of the cycle. So take a listen to this bell-like sound I've got here. And as you can see here, I've managed to get a slope on my LFO, and I'm going to actually put a negative 100 next to detune. And you get a nice Doppler effect as the bell tones detune over time. So let's take a look at a couple more examples. In this case, I'm going to be manipulating the FX knob. And so in this case, it was manipulating the cutoff of the formant filter. Now in this example, notice that there's some values set in the random column, and I'm using this in conjunction with the pulse sequencer. So this is basically adjusting the position and the brightness each pulse with a random value. Now RingsFX supports MPE, and you can switch to the MPE keyboard by pressing this little button to the right of the display. Now the benefits of this keyboard are that you can do real-time pitch bends, and also that you can actually modulate something using the mod matrix by actually dragging up vertically on the key. And dragging left to right while the key is pressed will do the pitch bend. Now when I dragged vertically on the key, you didn't hear anything because there's nothing assigned to CC74. But if we were to assign a value to CC74 against brightness, like plus 100, let's give that a go. So you could hear the cutoff filter then opening up as I was dragging up the key. Now let's try decreasing something from position. So let's return back to the standard keyboard and explain another function we can apply using the mod matrix. Now this is one of the default patches called Solitude, and what I want to do is add a little bit more dynamics to it. Now you can see here I'm pressing notes at different points vertically on this keyboard. Now I want you to notice that the higher I press on the note, the quieter the sound. Now we can utilize that incoming velocity to alter the brightness, and to do that we're just adding an item within the velocity column against brightness. So the lower I touch the note, the brighter the sound gets. Now because of the nature of some of the synthesis modes, it might be that certain patches you create, especially if you're using white noise, can become quite hot on the output. And to temper those, you can use the output limiter. Now one important thing to note is this is a global parameter and not stored per patch. If you press this button, it will toggle the limiter on and off. And if you hold the button down, you get the configuration options. So a general rule here is the bigger the number, the more output limiting will occur. Now this is a good option if you don't want to reduce the volume any further. Now RingsFX ships with a number of colour schemes, and you probably noticed me switching colour sets as I've done these tutorials. And to access these colour schemes, you, instead of pressing on the menu button, try long pressing on the menu button. Now, a number of my apps have a similar mechanism for changing the colour set. So you can long press the menu button to access these. And we have a number of options which you can choose from, which I've created myself. Or alternatively, if you want to define your own, all you need to do is go back into the settings menu, and from the open window submenu, select color scheme editor. And from here we can select one of the 8 colors used to render the interface and adjust the values accordingly. Once you've finished, you can save your color scheme, and you're free to load those back in at will. Once you've saved the scheme, it will be loaded as the next default when you next run the app. Again, if you want to revert back to the default color scheme, you can pick it back from the menu and it will replace all your changes. Now, on the off chance that someone out there creates a lovely bank of presets they want to send me, this is how you do it. I'm going to explain how to back up and how to restore banks and individual presets. So the easiest way to achieve this, and the way I recommend, is to use the Files app. And if you drag the Files app out of your dock and pin it to the side of your iPad, and then ensure that you've picked a suitable directory to drop the files in. Now, in my case, I've created a folder, wherever it is, called Camp Work. And from here, we can now open the program manager and we can pick any one of these banks, and we can literally tap, hold and drag on the bank and drag it into the Files app. So I'm going to do that with the user bank. Now notice once it's copied, it appears with a file extension, RingsFX _ bank, and it's important that you keep that file extension as is. Now you can always compress this bank into a zip file, so it's easy to pass on to somebody else. Now if we browse this new folder that we've got inside of the Files app, you'll see that we've got the default group, and inside there's all the presets. Now you can also drag and drop groups and even presets, but the presets are kind of covered at the minute. So you can drag the Files app over to the left and then drag individual presets over to the Files app. Now if I went and deleted the same preset within the file manager, I can drag that back in and it will appear as simple as that. Now if I move that back to the right and rename this bank, making sure that I keep the same file extension, that's really important, because that's how RingsFX recognizes this when we drop it back in. So I've actually changed the bank name here, and when I drop it in you'll now see a new bank created. So nothing could be easier. It's the easiest way to back up and restore banks, groups and individual presets. Alternatively, if you don't want to use drag and drop or want to back up to a PC or a Mac, you can use the file transfer option, which I covered briefly in the first video. Now you can only perform web transfer in standalone mode by pressing this little button at the bottom of the screen. Now when you see this pop up, you can choose whether you want to save presets or color schemes. So I'm going to select presets, and I'm given a URL to type in on my Mac or PC. Just be aware though, if you're going to do this, both your iPad and your desktop PC on Mac have to be on the same Wi-Fi network. When you type in the URL within your web browser, you'll see an interface that allows you to back up and restore. So that just about covers what I want to talk about today in this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and thumb up the video. I'll see you next time.